Hello, folks. Welcome to the channel where I talk about web, node, and developer productivity related tools. In continuation to the last episode, I'll start talking about form validations. So let's jump right into it. So here I have a plain username password form on which we'll be adding some basic validations, and we'll also try to see how we can customize the error message that browser shows. Okay, so let's see how this form behaves as of now. So here I have it running. What I'll do is I'll simply refresh it for the sake, and I'll simply input something here, right? I'll say demo. It's a login. It tells me that username inputted was demo, password inputted was demo. But what happens if I don't input anything, right? We want user to input at least a character, but this is not even uh, showing any error or anything. How do we make sure that user at least inputs something, at least single character in both the inputs, right? Okay, so for that, what you do is you simply come here and say required, right? Again, you come here and say required. This way, you are telling browser that uh, you want browser to validate these inputs on your behalf when your user clicks on this login button, which has a default type of submit. Okay, so let's see how it works now. So I'll delete this, and I'll say login. Okay, error solved. This is good. What happens if I input something here and I say here? Okay, this is also good. Now if I submit, it tells me this. One thing you might have noticed that if there is any error, this particular function which I have written here, handle form submit, won't get called because there is a error in form submission itself, right? So that function will not get called, right? So this is exactly what we wanted. But if you have noticed closely, this is very generic error. No matter what what field is invalid, it still gives the same error. That please fill in this input, right? Which is really not what user would understand, right? Now, how do we customize this message? So what you do for that is you basically get hold of the DOM reference. So let's try to customize the validation error for username. What you do is document.get emailed by ID, and we will simply say username. Why username? Because I have ID to be specified as username. This will give me a reference to something called as HTML input element. It's class inside JavaScript. It's a built-in class on which you have several properties. One of which is add event listener. So what you can now do here is add event listener. So you are basically telling browser that I want you to call this function, which is the second argument, on every time user types into this particular input box, which is username. Inside which, what we'll do is username dot set some validity as string. Yeah, and again we'll do use username dot check validity. Okay. So what are we doing with this here? We are telling that the input is valid. That means we are clearing out whatever are the previous errors, right? So suppose user is trying to input username password, but there is some error in the username, and again he is submitting or again he is typing inside it. We don't want to annoy the user with again the same error that uh, there is something wrong with this input field, right? For that, we will simply clear the errors, whatever the previous errors were there. Now, this what this second line will do is it will force the browser to run a validity check on this input field. But how do we show a custom error, right? For that, what you do is username dot add event listener input, sorry, invalid. So browser triggers this callback or event handler whenever the input is uh, found to be invalid, and it is found to be invalid whenever you run check validity, right? So now what we'll do is username dot set custom validity as custom error, right? Let's see how it works. So if I do this, oh, this is nice. Now we can customize our error messages, right? What we'll now do is we'll simply say if username dot value equals empty, what we will say is we want the username to be filled, right? So we will say username is a mandatory field, right? Let's try it again. I'll clear this, click on this. Wow, this is exactly now conveys the exact message we want to tell to the user, right? Now, but how do we make sure that username is at least 4 characters long, right? So we can again come here and say in length is equal to 4, right? Let's again try to submit it with empty. It does nothing. If I input with this, it now tells that please lengthen this text to 4 characters. But that's really not good thing, right? So that was a really long message. We want to give some crisp message that user can understand, right? So again, we will come here and we will say username dot set custom validity. We will simply say username should be at least 4 characters. Uh, right. Sorry for the typo. Again, let's come here. Try to input 3 fields. Let's say login. Now it's giving a very concise message. But if you have noticed, our this callback is going to get called on every uh, key place, right? So let me do a console dot log here of maybe say uh, in input event handler, which is exactly uh, not a good ideal case, right? So every time I input, you will see that this is actually increasing the count, which actually we don't want, right? So we can simply change it to blur. That really minimizes the operations browser will have to do. Every time I go out of this, it will call it, right? Right? It shows the message as well, which is exactly what we want. Okay, now how do we make sure that uh, we are showing proper error message on everything, right? So we can again come here and say max length is equal to uh, maybe say 10. But how do we now know that this is actually a 4 character error or a 10 character error, right? For that, you can simply go to MDM uh, and you can come here. There are concise list of form validation errors here, right? Too short, too long, right? So you can simply check for validity here. I'll come here and say if username dot validity equals, let's see what is the thing under too short, right? Yeah, validity state dot too long. I'll simply come here and say validity state got too long. I want to show that the input is too long, right? I'll simply copy this line and paste it here. Username should not be more than 10 characters. I know I'm a bad typer, so bear with me. Again, if we do too short, we will show that it's going to be disabled. Let's change it to whatever it was. You don't have to remember all of these. You simply need to know where to look for what thing, right? So let's copy. Yeah, it's too short, right? Let's again come here. Let the input three characters and say login. Right? It should have given us this error. Let's try to console log this username dot validity state. Okay, it says cannot read property of undefined. So this is something problematic. Oh, we need to check for validity. Okay, let's add on my part. Let's try to see what's the validity state for this. Let's comment this for now. I'm going to keep it raw just to make sure that you know how people debug their code or how do they progress onto their code, right? Now I have this, right? Yeah. So I need to do for check for validity, not validity state. Again, let's try to do this. It gives that this is the thing. Let's try to input three fields. It tells that at least four characters long. If I input maybe say 10 characters, I'll input 11 characters and say this. Okay, this is working. Why is it? I gave it max length to be 10, right? It should have taken that. Oh, okay. I need to input one more character. Okay, it doesn't allow me to input more than 10 characters itself. So even if I input, it won't let me input more than 10 characters, which is good, right? So yeah, that's pretty much about it. Uh, I hope you found this uh, nice enough. I'll leave the link to this in the description of this video. Cool. Thank you. Cool. Thank you. And see you in the next one. Bye bye.